Hey everyone, it's George LaRocque here at WorkTech. Thanks for being here. We've had some more exciting industry news in the last week. Ashby announced a Series C VC round of $30 million. And Ashby is a fairly new recruiting platform. And Benji Encz, the co-founder and CEO of Ashby, is here to talk about the deal and tell us more about Ashby. Welcome, Benji.
Thanks for having me, George.
I'm so excited to have you here. Could you, spend a couple minutes, introduce yourself and Ashby?
Yes, happy to do that. So my quick background, Benji, co-founder and CEO of Ashby. I have a background before starting a company that's mostly in software engineering. Most recently, I was at a company called PlanGrid, which was a little bit under radar, but a construction tech company that got acquired by Autodesk, and was there from about 100 to more or less 400 people or so. And I joined as a software engineer and then relatively quickly took over an engineering team and eventually became a director of engineering. And as soon as I switched into a leadership role, spent pretty much all of my time hiring engineers, which this was like back in 2015, 16, 17. And just as today, it was really hard to hire engineers. So I spent a lot of time with the recruiting team, with recruiting tools to kind of really hone in on that hiring process. And as part of that, ended up stumbling into kind of recruiting ops and tooling. I had some pain points around reporting and metrics at the time with kind of the legacy vendors I was using, and also around scheduling and coordination. And overall, it just felt like when I looked at the go-to-market teams or engineering teams and recruiting teams, that there was a pretty big gap in tooling that was available to recruiting teams. And so that was kind of impetus. I ended up watching the space for about 2 years. I was using Lever and Greenhouse. There were kind of relatively new vendors in the space. And so there was a question of like, is there actually an opening? But we ended up talking to about 100 TA teams or so to kind of validate that there's maybe something here. And there were a few interesting themes. Recruiting operations was becoming a thing in more and more companies. And so I think that was one thing that I found really exciting, because when we talked to teams that had recruiting operations, they really thought about data and operations and automation much more deeply than some others. And we also saw teams kind of buying more and more tools. That was kind of my experience. We didn't only have the ATS, but we ended up getting a separate scheduling tool and a separate reporting tool. And so we actually saw that spend in the tools on the recruiting side was actually going up. And so that felt like a really exciting opportunity. And that was end of 2018, more or less. And so we kind of decided to go after this and see if we can build something new and really think about kind of the recruiting teams of like 2018, with recruiting ops, with all the sophistication that had kind of evolved over the last few years, and built them from scratch, all in one product. And so that took us a few years longer than we thought it would take us, but that's kind of what brings us here now. I'm happy to go a little bit more in the kind of the milestones along there, but it's a super high level.
Yeah, I think I remember hearing about Ashby, but you were pretty stealthy for a while, right?
Yeah.
Until when did the product really come to market?
Yeah. That's a good point. I think with some of the learnings when we looked at other vendors in the space is that we did decide to make a pretty big platform investment up front. And so we spent quite a while actually building with 0 customers and then building with kind of like early access customers. And so I left my job like late 2018. We onboarded the very first paying customer in like mid 2020, but it was until September 2022 where we decided that is kind of ready to launch to the market, and it's like our original vision of having all these different products bundled into one, serving mid-market growing companies was kind of in place. So it took us quite a while to get it right, but I think the benefit of that is that this technology foundation has really helped us to have really high product velocity, and I think also scale into enterprise more easily than some other vendors before us.
Okay. And how would you describe beyond the foundational sort of scale, what are some other differences around Ashby for those that are familiar with recruiting environment?
Yeah, so I think there are a few things to call out. The biggest one is definitely around reporting and data, and that's something we emphasized really strongly when we started. When we had these 100 interviews with TA teams, that was the number one pain point. That was why people were switching between ATSs. And so we really focused on how do we have like really advanced reporting directly in the product. So instead of rolling out like Tableau or Looker and working with a data team, recruiting can actually self-serve really advanced metrics directly in the products. That was a really strong focus for us, and kind of still the biggest, easy to understand differentiator. Then the second piece is you do replace multiple products, and we go quite deep in these areas. So if you today have like a scheduling automation tool added to your ATS, because your ATS is relatively limited, we have that functionality, and we went really deep in that. And we've replaced these point solutions in a lot of companies we went into. And so typically when people roll out Ashby, we do replace like 3 to 5 different tools. And so it is a little bit of a different motion to have like all these powerful things on a single platform. And I think, again, that third point around kind of the underlying platform is really built kind of with RecOps teams in mind, that they really thrive on, again, advanced reporting, but also having a lot of customization that makes it easier to standardize how the recruiting process run across a large number of jobs. And then there's a lot of smaller things. I think given that we started in 2018, we had the benefit of hindsight. We kind of see what were the pain points with existing vendors, what can we do better. And so there's a lot of smaller UX things as well that really matter to end-to-end users. Probably wouldn't make it through in this conversation, but reducing a lot of clicks throughout the product and all of that as well.
Okay. And you mentioned, sort of the scale and enterprise, how you've built for that environment. Can you tell me more about, what an ideal customer for Ashby might look like?
Yeah. So today, I think the actually most important thing that is common across our customers is that they care quite deeply about talent acquisition and hiring and the quality of the talent they bring on. There are obviously like hundreds of vendors in this category, and there's a lot of kind of lower end solutions for companies that are not hiring a lot or don't have to compete for talent. So the biggest common denominator is people are trying to fill not super easy to fill roles, and they care deeply about delivering a really good process and great talent. In terms of scale of companies, that can vary quite a bit. We're now kind of in the 1 to 10,000 range primarily, with like a couple customers above that. But if you'd asked me 2 years ago, it would have been like 1 to 1,000, but it's moved up pretty significantly. But we do work with super early stage companies, oftentimes founders that work either as a second company or they were a hiring manager before. They want to lay the right foundation from day one. Then all the way up to kind of the lower enterprise as well. So that's kind of the range today. Yeah.
And so I appreciate all of that background. But the deal is real exciting. I'd like to dig in on the deal a little bit now that understanding that backdrop. So I cover this space and have been for years, and it hasn't been easy the last couple of years to raise money. And so I'm wondering, given your success, what was happening in the market or happening at Ashby or both that made this the time and led you to this Series C?
Yeah, happy to speak about that. I think there are a few things at highest level. The business is growing really nicely, and that's kind of that is what makes it relatively easy to close these rounds. So that's kind of been very fortunate for us. The underlying reasons for that, I think we had the right vision back in 2018, and I think it accelerated a bit in this market where we kind of started with this vision of all-in-one, because we just like, if you're going to build something new in 2018, you would expect these things to be part of the product. It was just like it made sense, but that value proposition, while it was really strong back then, it has accelerated in this market where there are more and more companies that are really trying to reduce the number of SaaS vendors they need to work with. Right around when we launched September 22, we already had a couple hundred customers at that point, but it was kind of it was like the public launch. And so that accelerated the business quite a bit. And we got a pretty big wave of customers that had kind of accumulated what our marketing team has coined a Frankenstack, but it was like, I've got this ATS, this scheduling tool, this analytics tool, and my bill is this much. And my finance team has asked me to cut back, but we've built all of our processes around having really these advanced capabilities. And so we were able to deliver a value prop where people could hold on to kind of really sophisticated tools, but reduce spend a bit and also reduce the number of vendors they rely on. And that accelerated the business quite a bit. Interesting thing there is we also have moved over quite a few really, AI businesses that are doing fantastic, and they're not trying to cut costs. But I think the general sentiment of like trying to reduce the number of vendors you work with has kind of taken hold in this space. And so that's helped us. But I think the most underlying thing is probably, I think the thesis was right that, this, even though we're a little bit of a slump in the market, just like recruiting ops is becoming a thing, companies are investing more in recruiting tooling. I think that's still an underlying trend that has helped us quite a lot.
Yeah, I would agree with you on both points. Our research and any research that I've looked at in the space shows um, uh, customers are either putting more tech into their recruiting environment or replacing existing tech. And your other point, I was just down in DC at Recruit DC, and I was telling them, it's a platform world right now, but it's not necessarily about fewer systems, but fewer interfaces
Yeah.
as well. But of course, consolidating systems is cost efficient. So that's a big part of the pressure. So our research says corroborates all of that for sure. In your blog post, which was very well written, by the way, you made a point about the deal. And I think in this market, for any founders or anyone following this space, it was a really interesting point that this was an up round.
Yep.
And well, I know what that means when you say that. Let's talk it, because I think a lot of folks they don't really, every deal, every investment from a VC isn't equal. Let's put it, not just an amount. They're not structured the same. So what does that mean for you, and why was that important for you to call out?
Yeah. Largely because we were among pretty much every single tech company out there probably that raised money in a very different market environment. Last, like our Series B was in 2022, and kind of, the tail end of the good market. And so we raised on a very strong, revenue multiple at the time. And a lot of companies in that position had a hard time raising money again now, exceeding that valuation, because the multiples in the public markets and then also the private markets have dropped so much. And so when we pulled this round forward a little bit because the business was doing really well. And when we went out, that was for us a criteria. It's like, hey, if we're going to pull this round forward, we want like a solid increase in valuation from the prior round, because that's a really strong signal to the team and customers and everyone else that, that shows we're doing well. And so that was a focus. And so we touched on this in the blog post, but we increased revenue by about 6x, a little bit over 6x since that last round. We didn't increase valuation 6x because the valuation multiples have come down, but it was a really good round, super clean term sheet as well. And so that's why we called it out, because these growth rounds are few and far between right now, and sometimes they come with structure, sometimes they're down rounds, and that's not the end of the world. It's way better than running out of cash, but that was still it was a nice position to be in.
Yeah, and there have been a number of down rounds. Also, a lot of companies really at an earlier stage extending their rounds, so keeping their valuation and sort of reopening their deals. So that jumped out at me when I saw that. So I think that's a great point as well. So now you've got you've had this growth, you've achieved this up round in a difficult market. What are you going to do with these funds? What have you got for plans?
Yeah, I mean, generally we've been, our mode from day one has been kind of just chipping away at this really long-term vision, kind of piece by piece and relatively quietly. As you seen, you hadn't heard about us probably like maybe a year or two ago. And so at the root of it is really just doing that. And I think I put it in a blog post, there's no massive change of direction in the business. There's like kind of working towards this longer term vision. There are a few things that are priorities this year. There is a stronger focus on enterprise, but at the same time, we're near dear to our heart, like the one person founder company as well. I think it keeps us honest and making a product something that's easy to use and easy to adopt, which matters, to the end users in large companies as well. But enterprise is a little bit of a focus. There is definitely more focus on AI capabilities. We were pretty early to put some into the product, and the models are improving. So there's areas we're focused on as well. But other than that, it's really, I think customers that have worked with us have really enjoyed the general product velocity of like how each of the product areas we have are improving. And so it's really just more of that, more scheduling functionality, more CRM functionality, and kind of just working along that roadmap. There's more than enough stuff still to build.
Okay. So did you say that for customers, the impact it'll be product, they'll see it in the product primarily?
Yes. That is primarily. And then, we do, there's things we have to do as we grow, which is, increase our customer facing teams. Obviously it comes along with that. So more support and CS hiring. And then also a little bit of marketing. I think it ends up benefiting customers in the long run, as we grow revenue, but we're definitely focused more on getting word out now than 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
So,
okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think I've seen you at a show or two. So I know you're heading in that direction. So the market's going to hear more from you. The customers will see things in the product. The other constituency I always like to ask about is the employees. Do you, how do you see, this creating opportunity or impacting them at all?
Yeah, I mean, again, similar to what we talked about earlier, I think the terms of that round and the timing of this market was just great. A great sign for people that have been here for a long time that the market is really rewarding the work we've been doing. So I think that's a super nice thing. We don't spend a ton of time on these milestones, but at least a little bit. So that's been good. And then it's really about expanding the team. We've been pretty careful about how fast we hire ourselves. We try to not triple the company right after raising rounds. And so there are definitely some areas where we want to add more. And I think people are excited to get a little bit of help because we're doing a lot with a small team. So I think that's probably the most immediate impact.
Yeah.
And then in terms of opportunities, I think that's a nice thing. If you do have a growing business, there's always like new roles opening up. And we actually, for a company our size, have quite a few examples now of internal mobility and people moving across teams in new roles. So I think if you're growing and have new opportunities open up, that's always nice for people that want to stay long-term at a company.
Yeah. And so I know you mentioned sort of more of those pillars in the product that you talked about from the analytics, scheduling, and so forth. Are there any specific things in the roadmap that folks can look forward to, late 2024 into 25 that you can talk about?
Yeah, I actually just started a little blog post on this first internally, and we'll make it external as well. We actually don't have long-term roadmaps, and that's kind of been a thing from day one. And I have a section in there that says never say never, but our kind of philosophy around roadmaps has been, we really only talk to customers in the broader market when we are actually working on something that is going to ship in the next 3 months or so. That's kind of our time window. There are some reasons for that. We've been able to be quite responsive to priorities in the market. And, if you look back over the last 3 to 4 years, what TA teams cared about has changed so often. If we would have had like a 12-month roadmap, it would have been like very likely that we're delivering stuff that's no longer as important. And so we really like the flexibility. We also like not overpromising and then potentially missing these deadlines. That's kind of something we've built a brand around. And so we just don't talk about super long-term stuff. I think the long-term vision is very, very clear in our heads, but the order in which we build things can change quite a bit depending on what customers are asking for or what the market is asking for more broadly. And so I don't have too many exciting specifics for you just yet. But on the AI side, there's quite a few interesting things. The problem with AI functionality, especially when it comes to pre-announcing it, is we really want to make sure that it works up to the standard that we think it should to put it out there. And so we have explored and killed things before we talked about them publicly because the models weren't quite there yet. But at some point, we may have a longer-term roadmap, but right now it's really just the main promise is that the product is going to improve very quickly and generally trend in the direction that our customers are asking for.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you've got, sort of a North Star on the platform and, what that looks like. And you're building toward that. And then you've got more of your roadmap is more like a schedule of what's going to be delivered versus a vision board.
Yes,
if you will.
I think that's right. And then internally, and again, I'm going to write about this, but I think it's helpful for customers as well. But we do have, what is important for us to understand is that each of these product areas are getting better. And so we have like fully staffed teams around them. So it's not like you're buying a product today and you may not see any improvements through reporting, for example. And then customer input is like a huge piece into this. So we've been able to maintain that and work really closely with our customers on ending up helping stack ranking things within that. But yeah.
Cool. So, I know how busy a time this is, and I know that there's a ton going on, especially right after you make an announcement. Lots of people like me want to get your time to talk about it. Is there where should folks go to learn more about Ashby? It sounds like you've got a blog post coming that they might want to keep their eye out for.
Yes, we actually have quite a bit of content. So if you follow our LinkedIn page, you'll probably get everything. You can also go to our blog on ashbyhq.com/blog and subscribe there. And there's like a few different things. There's obviously company-specific stuff, but we also have trend reports, which I think you and I talked about in the past, where we kind of benchmark data across our customers and share insights. So even if you're not immediately in the market for a new recruiting solution, I think there's some valuable content out there as well.
Yeah, I always appreciate when you benchmark what you're seeing in your customer base and sort of relate that to the market. It's very, very helpful. Well, Benji, congrats again. I really appreciate your time, and good luck to you and the Ashby team. And I hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting us. And we hope to make the news a few more times in the coming years.
All right, terrific.